You're listening to Character Crusade, Episode 5.
You're listening to Character Crusade.
Greetings, Crusaders. You're listening to Character Crusade Skyrim Roleplay Workshop. I'm Stu.
And I'm Joe.
And I'm Matt.
And welcome to Episode 5. Tonight we're going to be talking about, well, the character-focused roleplay aspects of character weakness and limitation, how we play that out in-game. But before we do that, we have a couple other things that we want to talk about. We're going to have a great character craft segment today. We're going to focus a little bit on Hinto, get an update on him and some of the things that Joe's been doing there. And then when we dive into play theory, we'll talk a little bit more about this idea of character weakness, which I think dovetails really nicely with our discussion about Hinto, given the fact that he's so weak. Right?
Oh, that was Matt.
Oh, I'm sorry, that was Matt.
Yeah, it's the weak Nord. Thanks.
The weak Nord. All right. But before we do that, we have a few announcements. You may have noticed that we are actually, in fact, releasing this weekly currently. In fact, I had somebody comment on YouTube, are you sure you know what bi-weekly means?
Fair enough question.
It is a fair question. And
it was BY weekly, not BI weekly.
Oh, yes. By the week.
Yes.
I see. See, it's all semantics, right? Oh, incidentally, ladies and gentlemen, Matt is joining us from some mysterious location on the East Coast. Is that correct, Matt?
That's right. I'm being sheltered here quietly on the East Coast, yes. Nothing alarming happening on the East Coast in any way whatsoever.
Oh, okay. It's not like a rendition or anything like that. You're not being held captive. You're just, there on business or something?
Not really sure you should have used the word rendition, because now I can't say it's not.
Oh.
No, of course it's not a rendition. I'm mostly out here to drive around and put as many miles on a rental car as I possibly can.
Well, we know that you're good at doing that.
Yes.
Yes,
I am. It's the world's fastest car.
Yes, your success is assured.
Yes, thank you. I'm actually just what I should do is rent a car and do Uber.
Mm-hmm. Well,
and
you are
play podcasts over and over and over for the listeners.
Yes, you're definitely missed here in the palatial Couch Warrior Network studio. but Joe and I are holding down the fort tonight, so we will manage somehow. And we've got Matt joining us via Skype, and we are not sponsored in any way by Skype yet.
Although we could be.
If
Yes.
they should like to do so, I think
Yes,
we would be
Yes, they
willing
should.
to
Yes, they
open
should.
up that dialogue.
yes, we would be more than happy to open up that dialogue and perhaps get them to help us with some of our connection and sound quality issues as well.
Yep.
Right?
I bet
I'm
they
sure
could
we'll
do
hear
that.
about it in the comments.
I'm sure we will. We always do. But we love you, dear listener, and we love all of your comments. Let's talk about announcements, shall we? As I was mentioning, yes, we are not exactly doing a bi-weekly podcast at the moment. That does not mean that we're going to be able to remain a weekly podcast. But the issue we have right now, dear listener, is that we are a brand new podcast on iTunes. And what that means is we have a very limited amount of time on the new and noteworthy list for our category, which is games and hobbies. So we have a very limited amount of time there. I think we get 3 or 4 weeks, and that time can actually vary. They will extend it depending on how popular your podcast is and how far kind of up the charts you're able to push as a new podcast. One of the advantages we have, of course, are you all on YouTube who have become fans of Couch Warrior and so forth. We have an audience in you guys who are interested in some of the topics we're covering, and that is why we have gone to a weekly podcast for a period of time to really try to rally around the idea of getting some listenership on iTunes and allowing new audiences to find us and the things that we're talking about here at Couch Warrior Network and Character Crusade. So, if you are looking to support this podcast, one of the greatest things that you can do, even if you can't do Patreon, if you can't do any of that stuff, one thing that you could do that would be immensely valuable to us is to go out to iTunes, to the Character Crusade page on iTunes, and give us a rating. Give us a rating and a review. The more ratings and reviews that we get, the higher we're able to push up that list and the broader audience we're able to reach. Really, our objective here is to try to reach the widest audience of like-minded people that we can. And well, those of you who follow us on YouTube know a lot about what we're about and what we do. There's a whole bunch of people out there who are podcast listeners on iTunes and other places who really don't. So anything you can do to help us reach them, that would be great. And incidentally, we would like to give a shout out to Wings of Light and Dark, who has been a long-time supporter of this channel and a great friend of this channel. He's contributed stuff on the wiki. He was the first one to get out there and do a rating and review for us. It was fantastic. And we're not asking you to go out there and give us a 5-star rating or anything like that. You give us whatever rating and review you think is fair based on the content we're producing and the direction we're taking this show. But, every little bit helps, and that's definitely something all of you can do that would be a huge help to us. The other thing is, I should mention also that if you want to find us on iTunes, the fastest way to do it is go to itunes.charactercrusade.com. itunes.charactercrusade.com will get you to our iTunes page. The next thing is Patreon. For those of you who have supported us on Patreon, really, really appreciate it. You can find our Patreon page by going to patron.charactercrusade.com. That'll get you to our Patreon page. Big shout out to Rob, who was our first supporter, who came in at $5 a month. Fantastic. Yeah. Thank you so much, Rob. You can't imagine how that helps us out. We can go a long way on $5. Another big shout out to Sam, who just today supported us at the $5 level also. Huge. Awesome. Thank you so much, guys. We really do appreciate it very much.
Okay, this seems like a pretty good time for this. Hold on.
What you got? Perfect.
Thank you, Wings of Light and Darkness, Rob
and Sam.
Sam.
And Sam. We really do appreciate it. Okay. Joe is moving into the production booth. We're going to definitely have to get you some kind of a switchboard with all kinds of sound effects on it, because that was awesome.
Production engineer Joe.
Exactly.
Oh, me with a button bar. I don't
I
think
know,
that's a good idea.
right? Now, in addition, we're very excited to announce that we have pushed our podcast out to Stitcher. Those of you who are fans of Stitcher can find us there now. If you're interested in getting to the page on Stitcher and quickly subscribing, if that is your podcast service of choice, you can go to stitcher.charactercrusade.com and find us there. What else, guys? Anything else we need to cover at this point?
Oh, boy.
I think that's
No,
about
we
it.
got lots of
that's
great
quite
stuff
a bit,
to talk
so-
about, but I still think that the greatest thing about the intro here is that we've got lots of great listeners, folks commenting, asking questions, and the donations are phenomenal, right? I mean, participating through Patreon, but I agree with you. It's just great to be able to get out and get all the materials off of iTunes and have it automatically sync, especially while I'm traveling. It's great to just get that stuff automatically. So thanks for getting the RSS feed all fixed up, Stu.
Yeah, got it all fixed up. So you can basically find this podcast anywhere. Now, if you go to the website and you scroll down to the bottom, we have added a series of sublinks down there that will take you to our podcast just about anywhere that you care to consume it. All right, before we get started, I would like to give a thank you to our first sponsor, audiobooks.com. Audiobooks.com has a whole bunch of titles out there that you can download. You can set up a free account today. It's a trial account that'll last you for a short period of time, but give you access to a free book. You can download it, give it a listen, see if you like it at all. The service is terrific. You can pay a monthly fee, and each month you will get a credit towards the purchase of an audiobook of your choice. That can actually go quite a long way when you consider, some of these books by George R.R. Martin are, between 25 and 30 hours of listening. And when you consider that you could get that book for free with the purchase of a monthly membership at about $14 or $15 a month, that book alone would probably cost you $35 or $40. So it's not a bad deal at all. Even if all you do is set up the trial and download your one free book a month, that complimentary book that comes with the membership, that's some literature that's getting into your brain that wasn't before. So something to consider. If you're interested in that, we have links to that also on the site. You can go to book.charactercrusade.com and set up a trial if you're interested. We're going to be talking about literature on this podcast frequently. So we really were seeking out a sponsorship like this because we knew that we would be folding in a lot of materials from various sources, and books are a huge source of inspiration for me. I do a lot of books, and most of it is audiobooks. So shout out to them. Thank you, audiobooks.com. All right, it's time for us to get into our character craft segment, so stick around. In tonight's Character Craft segment, we're going to talk about Joe's character, Hinto. We haven't gotten an update on him since when?
Oh, boy. Probably around
Episode
2?
Episode 2.
Episode 2, yeah. That's when you blew our minds with your whole deal about,
The Dragon Walls, yeah.
Yeah, the
There you go.
Dragon Walls. If you haven't heard it, go back, listen to
We can't say it
episode
again
2.
or we won't be able to function for the rest of the podcast.
Yeah, I know. I was kind of more or less catatonic after that.
Well,
so.
yeah. I mean, it's like anything, though, too. If you go over it too much, it loses its punch.
It really does.
So
But
go back, have a listen.
yeah, have a listen. What that did, though, is it touched off a conversation later on, off the air, about the direction of your character and this whole idea that maybe he couldn't read and that, he had been chosen by the walls instead of him choosing to read the walls.
Right.
Something in the walls had kind of sized him up and decided he was worthy. And it started this really interesting conversation about Hinto and his progression as a character. So I wanted to take an opportunity in this episode to really just kind of focus on Hinto exclusively and in the direction that you're taking him.
All right, sounds good.
So let us kind of, what's going on right now?
Well, first of all, let me say it's good to be back.
It's good to have you back.
As noted earlier, I was out for a little bit, birthdays, and then I got sick, and then I got a new job, and everything's starting to calm down, and here we are. So
yes,
we kicked Matt out, and
yeah,
we brought the A-team in.
Made
Kicked
some
me
room.
to the other side of the country.
Yeah, it's not my fault.
I know that you thought I could yell loud enough to be heard in the studio, but I do have to have some sort of electronic help this time.
All right. So, well, yeah, no, we had some interesting discussions because I've pretty much come to the conclusion that Hinto would be an illiterate character. He just simply, he's not going to read the books. He's not going to pick up things. He'll pick up books just out of curiosity and open them and then probably put them back down.
Mm-hmm.
Or, as the case, a courier has stopped him on a few different times, and basically when he gives him the whatever it is he's delivering, I have to play that off as he's asking him, read it to me. What's it say?
Okay.
So I can at least get the gist. So far I've acquired 2 inheritances.
Oh, nice.
So kind of feeling mixed feelings on that.
Okay, very, very fortunate that the couriers are generally very honest people.
Yeah, no kidding.
Right?
No kidding.
Or maybe Hinto's just nasty looking enough that they don't want to risk
Well,
crossing.
yeah, that could be.
Yeah.
I haven't really figured that out. Maybe he's just got to go and get his reward. I don't know.
Right.
His reward for
Right.
knowing someone.
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
So he's got.
It's always
he's
about
got
who you
that
know.
going, and like I say, if he finds a book, he'll pick it up out of curiosity. So that can kind of open up the ability to gain some of those leveling books.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't feel bad about opening one and getting the level or whatever if it's a skill book.
Okay.
But I usually don't keep it. I usually don't keep any of the books unless maybe they got a pretty cover or something. But for the most
Right.
part, it's dead weight. He's a nomad, so he's got to travel as light as he can, which he's not really doing very well at.
Right. Well, this character concept from the very start was kind of a nomadic tribesman, right? He's a
Correct.
The idea is he's a Nord, but he comes from more of a nomadic tribal faction.
Yep. Sorry.
Right. So not civilized necessarily.
Well, not uncivilized, just a different way of living.
Not civilized in the sense of we live in large communities and we
Correct.
have large governments and government supported systems in place. These kinds of things. The trappings of civilization.
Yeah, it's not a city like
Right.
comparable to
Yeah.
city life. No.
Okay.
It's
Hinto
definitely
appreciates his space.
Well, yeah, and the ability to move around and
Mhm.
go where you need to
Right.
either grow crops or find animals to hunt and all that good stuff. So
Well, this idea that a character can read is really fundamental to the game because so much is based on
It's
books. and-
implied, yeah.
So what?
Enormous assumption there.
Well, yeah. So what are you doing in a situation where you've got a character who is really, you're focused on this idea of being a shaman, but conceivably can't read spell books.
Well, one could go with the same philosophy that he's this because it's a spell. It's
Right.
it's just kind of embedding itself. It's magic. You can do that.
Right.
But yeah, as a shaman type of character, you would definitely think of spell casting,
Right.
and you can't do that without learning spells.
Right.
And the only way you learn spells is to read books, or you can't even have someone teach you.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, they can teach you and level your skills, but that doesn't give you any spells to work with.
Right. Right.
Every now and again, if you choose a certain point in a tree, you might gain a spell,
Mm-hmm.
but that's about it. So, but we had talked offline about the idea or the concept of playing someone that's this shaman spell, sort of pseudo spellcaster, if you will,
Right.
without any spells,
Hmm.
and relying really on artifacts and enchanted weapons, enchanted items and clothing.
Right.
Whether it's something you purchase or something you do. Right now, my enchanting is really horrid, so
Mhm.
I'm not enchanting anything myself.
Right.
And plus, you need to acquire those things to enchant so that you can disenchant, so you can learn
Hmm.
what it is that you want to do. But
Well, I like this idea of this idea of a spellcaster whose spellcasting ability is instinctive rather than intellectual. Right?
and that really plays in well with the whole Dragonborn,
Yeah, it does.
because now you can take those Dragonborn powers and give them a new identity.
Yeah, exactly. I think that's I love this idea, right? Imagine a character focused on spell casting
In a sense,
in a sense,
Mhm.
right? But who doesn't have any spells.
right? So yeah, after we had
But-
talked about that, it kind of resonated. I'm like, that'd be really cool. Let's see if we
Mhm.
can make that work. It's going to be really hard, especially at
Yeah,
low level,
for
because
sure.
taking down a dragon, taking down a dragon, whether you have a bow or a
Mhm.
spell, I mean,
Yeah.
at low level is still going to
It's
be
always hard.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's always hard.
So
But,
as I am able to start absorbing these
Mhm.
dragon souls, I'll be able to increase my shouts, and that's really where I want to focus the character on, is when he gets to a point where he has enough shouts and abilities with them,
Mhm.
I'll start weaning or relying less on melee and ranged weaponry. I can try
Yeah.
to use the shouts in a more creative way.
right. It plays really well with the story too when you think about it, because a character like this, what we know of Hinto, right, is that he grows up in a tribal environment, and then he basically goes on a sojourn to try to find his spiritual self. So presumably that doesn't happen until after he's spent a very long time living in this community and participating in that community, as a member of that community. So it's completely plausible that as he separates himself from the tribe, his focus is really on, I'm good with weapons. I know how to hunt. I know how to track.
Well,
Right?
it's survival.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
you do what you know best to survive. So that's what he's started out as,
Yeah.
is using those.
Mhm.
He started out two-handed, and I quickly migrated to a dual weapon style,
Okay.
because the two-handed just didn't feel right for the character's style.
Mm-hmm.
So, if I could get a couple perks back, but, there they are.
Right.
Two-handed weapons. But,
Mm-hmm.
so he's a dual wielder, which, of course, doesn't give him the shield option. So
Mm-hmm.
it makes him a little vulnerable since he wears light armor. But
Mm-hmm. Again, I like that though.
it's kind of the way it is.
He's light armor. He's mobile. He's a good hunter. So presumably, to me, when I think about that, I think of a fighting style that is really anchored in mobility rather than defensive armor.
Yeah, and it's
things
also
like that, right?
very offensive.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
At least that's how I've been playing it.
Right.
He's very kind of all hands on deck.
He's aggressive.
He's very aggressive in his battle. So
Okay.
he plows right into combat, light armor,
Mhm.
not with both blades flashing.
Yeah. Well,
I'm going to say, tell me a little bit about that.
In what respect?
Well, what's it like to plow into battle with no armor? I'm tempted
Well-
to just throw on everything that I can because I don't have the experience
Well,
yet, so I'm relying on the armor probably more than anybody else would.
Well, it's really a matter of gauging your battle. I won't send them into a full on dozen bandits or anything like that. So what I'll do is I'll often start out, if there's a large group, I'll start out picking them off with the bow.
Yep.
And then when they're whittled down or they've come
Mhm.
close enough, I'll switch up to melee and
Right.
and just whirlwind it and
Yeah.
hope I come out on the other end.
It's guerrilla tactics, right? Where
Mhm.
you're, you know, if you're a character who is, used to living and hunting and so forth, and
Right.
in wooded areas, you're used to fighting from concealment,
Well, yeah, and if you're
that kind of thing.
and if you're a hunter, you have to, because animals are
Yeah.
pretty smart to that.
Right, right. So then the philosophy would be that in melee combat, you're focused on damage output.
Absolutely.
How much damage can I do in the shortest period of time? So
Yep.
in this instance, what we're talking about is, wielding two weapons at the same time and using combat moves that are really focused on power attacks with two weapons and maximum damage output. So, your objective is really to bring your opponent to his knees as quickly as possible so that you don't take those shots, so that you don't have to worry about armor, and you fight from cover and from surprise and hit and run and stuff like that. So it's a different way of thinking about combat, but I think it's sort of a hallmark of the stealth type of fighter, the assassin or the scout or things like that.
Yeah, and I guess he would probably fit more in that, either at this particular moment, that scout/ranger type of, or archetype, if you want. Right now, I've got him using a Norse axe and a honed Nordic war axe, which is from the Immersive Weapons pack, I believe, if I remember right.
Dual axe wielder.
Dual axe wielder.
I love that.
So one's kind of your sharp, almost kind of a stereotypical looking like Viking war axe kind of shape to it. And then the other is almost like a pick. It's like a dual pick. It's actually pretty brutal looking.
Nice.
So
that's pretty cool. So let's talk a bit more then about this idea of the instinctive spellcaster.
So
shouts make a lot of sense to me.
Yeah,
for sure.
Yeah, that for sure. That really will be his bread and butter as he has more to choose from. Right now, as I said, he's doing a lot of melee, but shouting when he can. Whirlwind sprint. I've used that a few times when I'm encumbered, and I don't want to drop anything.
Oh yeah.
So
guess I never really thought about using it for that.
What's nice is it recovers fast enough so you can use it frequently.
Okay.
I went travel all across Skyrim doing that, but if you're not too far from the town, then it works okay. And there's loot you just don't want to get rid of.
Right.
So, but really, as far as kind of this battle mage goes, it's not even. Pardon me. I was actually going for a battle shaman. It's really just a shaman. I mean, that's the end goal, is to create this shaman character. So what I did after our discussion, because I had already spent some points and bought in spells.
Purchased. Bought.
Just bought. Good Lord.
What's the right word on this, Matt? Bought.
Purchased is easier, but bought is correct.
Okay.
Me feel English?
Did you earn it?
That's impossible.
Was it gifted to you?
Apparently grammar was not.
Perhaps we can go somewhere in office about it.
The grammar wall did not choose you.
No.
Yes.
You chose poorly. So, no, what I had done was I went in, I was going to try to do some console commands since I play on the PC and strip out all the spells that I had purchased for him.
Okay.
Because I wanted to really get back to the basic of that idea, of the shaman idea, and really that ritualistic, instinctual magic. So I was having a tough time doing it with console. For some reason, it wasn't removing them.
Okay.
But I did find a nifty little mod that I installed, and all I had to do was equip the spell I wanted, and then I would equip the mod like I would a power.
Okay.
And then I just hit the power key, and for whatever spells I had running at the time, it would remove them.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh, that's kind of
It
cool.
works really slick. So I had like about 6, 7 different spells, so not a
Yeah,
lot. At
you were
that
pretty
point.
low level.
So it didn't take me long to do
Mhm.
that at all. So I totally removed his spell, so it's coin wasted, but
Eh,
know,
yeah, but
you live and
it's
learn.
it's coin spent on
Yeah.
this concept that you're going after,
But
which in the end I think is only going to be stronger because of the limitation you're putting on yourself.
yeah, so I really have I have no spells with the character. He
Okay.
has absolutely no spells. Now I did spend early on as well a couple perks in some of the I think alteration and maybe conjuration. I can't
Okay.
remember, but so they're still there. I wish again if I could have those back, that'd be kind of nice.
That would be.
I bet I could find another place for
Yeah.
them. But
Well, you know what I really like about this concept is, and this is really great for our play theory topic tonight, which is about character weakness and limitations and how that enhances role play, right? But what I like about this concept is that the idea of instinctive learning, or this kind of sort of instinctive way of acquiring knowledge, I think also plays very well into crafting, because it's completely conceivable that we all know people who pick up skills very quickly. I've known people who were not developers but could sit down and in a day or two look at a string of code and understand what it does.
right.
And so I think that there are scenarios where individuals might have an aptitude,
Right.
for some of this stuff.
Oh, for
right?
sure. For
So
sure.
I could definitely see crafting coming into play here.
Mhm.
What about, I mean, if you don't have any spell books, you're not casting any spells in any of those kind of mage-related perk trees,
Mhm.
my assumption is, are you going to are there any perks that a person would pursue that you can think of that would be in any of those kind of standard, destructive and destruction, illusion, any of that? Or
Well, again, it comes down to you can spend the perk points, but if you don't have the spells,
right.
they're not going to do you much good.
Right, and as far as I know, there aren't any perks in those trees that have any sort of, well, there are perks in those when you're using Perkus Maximus that have passive effects that could benefit you in other ways, but I think
I
that
don't know if there's any magic ones though in some
Well,
of those. There are in some of the others.
I don't know. I think that's worth researching and talking about in a future update for Hinto, because
Yeah.
I think this is a really unique idea.
Yeah.
A spell-focused character who does not have spells.
So yeah, speaking of perks, so now lately, I've been utilizing the perks in the speech tree because
Okay.
I do use Perkus,
Okay.
and there are a few. The way Perkus restructures some of all of the perks, but the perks in the speech tree have a lot of benefits to dragon shouts, and
Okay.
there are some also, if I'm recalling, up the right side of the speech tree
Mm-hmm.
that will have some synergy with the destruction tree,
Uh-huh.
but it's based on your destruction spell skill, your
Okay.
skill level.
Yeah, yeah.
So
Mm-hmm.
it's got some synergy points there, but again, you need to be
Right.
casting
Right.
destruction spells.
Yeah, I think it's worth taking a look. And for those of you who are who've not used Perkus Maximus, what we're talking about is it's a mod that is a complete overhaul for the perk system in Skyrim. It makes it a bit more granular, kind of a lot more detailed, quite a bit more interesting. So rather than having these large groupings of perks where, if you acquire that perk, it just bumps damage in a particular area by X%, and you can do that 5 or 6 times. It breaks all of those out into more granular and individual type of perks that have much more interesting effects on what you can do.
Mm-hmm.
And they really allow you to dial in or focus a character in ways that you couldn't with the vanilla perk system.
Right.
So as Joe was mentioning, there are perks in there in the speech tree that give you really great bonuses on dragon shouts.
A lot of
You
it has
know,
to
and-
revolve around cooldown, but yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Like, you can recover the ability to use that shout more quickly, and things like that.
Right.
I think there are some also that have an impact on the damage that certain types of shouts can do.
Yep.
Things like that.
Yeah, and that's an example of the destruction
Right.
synergy I was talking about.
Mhm.
Was there is one, I don't recall what it's called, but it will do an additional
Okay.
amount of damage.
Yeah, I really do love the Perkus Maximus speech tree, and
Yeah, it makes it viable.
it really does. I hadn't paid that much attention
I
to it
hadn't either.
before, and then recently I started a new warrior character as part of my epicosity project. I was creating my new harbinger, right, and getting into the speech tree and using some of the perks in there. That there are perks that allow you to, they give you this commanding kind of presence, right?
Right.
Where when you activate that power, any warriors or followers or people who are on your side fighting with you get bonuses just because you're there.
Yeah. Right. Yeah, the
know,
battle cries and all that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep. And there's the battle cries, and there's
There's
some
an anthem.
Yeah, there's a battle anthem. It's called Battle Anthem.
Yeah.
And I love this idea that it makes you feel like you're truly a leader, and the fact that you're there is benefiting all the people around you and stuff.
Right,
So-
right. Which could have a tremendous impact on the Civil War quest line.
Oh, for sure. Yeah, in groups where you're
Yeah.
fighting in large groups like
Right.
that, for sure.
So I guess the only other thing I will go into a little bit with Hinto, and the fact that I've stripped him of his magic as Shaman,
Mm-hmm.
is the fact, if you remember when we first talked about him originally, he went into the Companions quest line.
Yeah.
So I'm kind of coming back around to that now
Okay.
and revisiting that quest line.
Okay.
I'd like to try to finish it out and continue with it and try to bring that to kind of a head. So,
Okay.
and part of that is this kind of this raw power that I've gotten with the werewolf.
Okay.
So I accepted the werewolf offering,
Okay.
and this character is really liking the werewolf power.
Yeah.
He's just, it's that savage,
Right.
bestial instinct. I don't know what it is, but I've been playing him using that frequently. I've actually earned and spent, I think, around 4 or 5 points in the werewolf tree now.
Oh, really?
Yeah,
Wow.
so I've been tearing people up. It's been fun.
I've never done that.
It's fun.
I've never tried.
I
it.
had a great kill cam just last night, actually. I was playing. It's one as a werewolf I've never seen. A lot of times, one of the kill cams for a werewolf is he'll pin the person on the ground and he'll just start tearing at him with his claws.
Right.
Now, this one that I had seen or had gotten, he actually, as if you're viewing your character as the werewolf from behind, so you're looking over his shoulder from the rear.
Okay.
And he actually picked the bandit up, hoisted him in the air, and then tore their head off.
Oh my God.
Wow.
I never saw that. I'm like, oh, I wish I could have captured that one,
Yeah.
but I didn't. So he's been having a lot of fun with it. A little too much because I've gotten myself into some kind of big trouble going into werewolf form and running into groups of Imperials or Stormcloaks.
Yeah. Yeah.
And like big groups, 12,
Yep.
15 of them. Because I do have a Civil War Overhaul in.
Okay.
So they're wandering around in large
Oh,
groups.
large groups. Yeah.
And you're not going to bring those down.
No, sometimes it's
just too
better
many.
just to run.
Too many.
But
So I've had some trouble with that. I've learned.
well, I'll be interested in hearing more updates
So
on,
yeah.
on Hinto in this, in the whole werewolf thing. I've played characters who are werewolves, but I've never really invested fully in the
and
power.
I
So
think that's going to be something I will probably pursue actively. Is that werewolf
Right.
form along with this dragon shout,
sounds cool.
because it works really well to take down a couple bandits. There's 3 of them left, and then you form into a werewolf as they're surrounding you,
Nice.
and then you just go berserk.
Well, there is much more to come on Hinto, ladies and gentlemen.
So
I think we're all kind of curious to see how this whole thing plays out, especially as you go up levels and you're able to start acquiring some crafting skills and
yeah, his equipment is
things like
still
that.
pretty standard fare, so nothing real
So,
special
Joe,
with
question for you.
that. Yes.
Do you think you're going to come out of this character, Hinto, with skills like, someone who loses their sight or something like that? There's a sort of a corresponding pickup in other senses. Do you think that your gameplay will change in general for the better, just for the lack of having some of these, regular gameplay features for you? I mean, your character is effectively hobbled in some ways, but you're going to get so good in some of these other areas that you're going to,
Well, yeah,
Yeah,
I think it's
strong.
going to bring out. I think it's going to bring out some different ways of playing the game that I haven't done before, and I think it's going to make my gameplay better, and my experience better. So just because it's going to be really interesting.
Yeah, I think so.
Sure.
So yeah, I mean, to your analogy, yes, I can definitely I can see that happening. Whether it does, we'll find out. But I could see it happening.
Well, it's a grand experiment, right? We keep talking about how Skyrim is a sandbox, and that's really what it's all about. What are the different kinds of experiences I can have? And I think one of the most interesting things that you can do is find cool ways to focus your efforts around a character by imposing some limitations on yourself. And
Exactly.
that's really what the crux of this episode is about. So we are going to transition into our play theory segment, so stick around. So in today's play theory segment, we're talking about weaknesses and or character limitations. And this is a concept that's near and dear to me because every single character I play has some kind of weakness or limitation. They don't necessarily need to be grounded in any kind of a game mechanic. It can be something that's just purely in your head that you do.
Well, a lot of it is self-imposed.
Yeah, exactly. It's a thing that you decide to make, an idiosyncrasy of the particular character that you're playing, and it's just something that you do, and you suffer the consequences for it occasionally. But presumably you're doing that because there's some value there. There's something that you can attach role play to that has value.
Right.
And I really wanted to talk about this one tonight. We got a great email through the website from someone named Callum. Callum, thank you very much for your submission. Callum is located in Scotland, and he sent us a role play quandary through the website. And he says, I was wondering if you could tell me how to play a character in Skyrim. I want a character that everyone is scared of when he walks into town. I want him to be a big muscular warrior that carries a special sword or that does amazing things. This character has to have a reputation for killing everything that has ever attempted to hurt him. He must be almost unstoppable, but I want him to have some kind of a weakness, just like Achilles. and how his heal was his weakness. I think that's a great question. And what I like about this is, I work in sort of a creative profession. And one of the things that we always talk about is how the most sort of best creative ideas often come out of situations where you place yourself in a creative box. Rather than saying that the world is your oyster and you can do whatever you want, you say, here's the box that you have to play inside of. Now do the most creative thing that you can inside it. And I think that I take that into Skyrim and say, if I'm going to come up with something interesting, I want to sort of balance it with something else that is a drawback, because as much as the awesome things that a character does help define who they are in a role-playing sense, so do the crappy things that they do, or the weaknesses they have, or the things they screw up on a regular basis, right? So I thought it would be fun to kind of talk about this concept. And, Hinto was a great example of that, right? Where in that situation, we're going to use a game mechanic and this idea of, we have this self-imposed restriction that, nope, he's not going to have any spell books, but he's going to be focused on spell power somehow, right?
Right.
So how does that manifest itself in a situation where the character just, he can't read? He can't read. Everything comes from his gut. It means that he's a character who's potentially highly emotional, perhaps.
I think that's safe to say.
Right? Which I think dovetails beautifully with the whole dual weapon thing. He's about aggression and first strike, and he thinks from his gut, and he's instinctive, and everything that you described about Hinto and in the direction you were taking him fit into that, right?
I think so. That's the goal.
Right.
Least.
Exactly. So I know that, different folks talk about, all kinds of different ways to do this. The obvious way is to use some kind of imposed game mechanic to say, I'm going to not allow myself to do this, or I'm not going to allow myself to do that, or whatever. But I think sometimes the more interesting ones are these sort of self-imposed restrictions that don't necessarily have a game mechanic, but are all about the psychology of the character.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
One, I don't know if this would be a game mechanic or a player choice. For example, always pulling out a knife or a dagger if you're going to skin a deer or that kind of thing, just because that's what you need to do.
No, I think it fits.
You're not going to skin it with a longsword.
Yeah. And you're talking about Hunterborn, the mod Hunterborn, right?
Hunterborn, or if you just want to imply it in the vanilla game. Because, you can gain the pelts and stuff from
that's
the
true.
deer. So, you can play it out in your head, or, in your game style, but not necessarily have it be a part of the game. But Hunterborn definitely, especially for this particular character of mine I'm running now, it is essential. I am really relying on that. What it offers to be a part of his this character in the play style. Yeah.
Well, I think to directly address Callum's question, Callum, I think there's all kinds of cool things you could do here. A great big character, somebody who's an imposing warrior, is sort of the alpha dog on the battlefield. I could think of all kinds of interesting ways that you might be able to give a character a weakness, but maybe what it is different kinds of weaknesses at varying degrees. One thing that I think came through in my playthrough with Fleet was that he had this sort of issue with not wanting to get wet unless he absolutely had to. He kind of avoided water, right? There were a lot of occasions where he would use a water walking spell, or he would look for a route around, or he would take the bridge, or he'd look for the shallow point. He was not a character that we saw do a lot of swimming. And I remember that there was even a point during part of the playthrough on Solstheim where I addressed that fact directly, where, he was, I was actually bitching sometimes about, man, I just don't feel like going through that body of water. I'm going to go around. I'm going to find, maybe I can jump across here. Maybe I can jump from rock to rock, this kind of thing, right?
Yep.
Whereas, for people who aren't necessarily into role play, the water is just a game space that you move through differently, and it's just like anything else. So I'm just going to run as the crow flies from point A to point B, and if I have to spend half the time swimming, fine. But with that character, I don't know, whenever I was playing the character, I just had this sort of visceral reaction, this negative feeling in my gut about the idea of getting wet. Like, why would I want to eat it? Like I didn't want to do it.
I had a similar feeling, and still do, whenever it rains.
Yeah, right.
Oh my gosh, out running down here, run to Riften, or I'm heading up to wherever, and a storm will brew up and start pouring down.
Yeah,
and it's just so miserable.
It is.
I just feel so miserable. I'm like, I gotta find a place to get out of this.
I know. I'm the same way.
This just sucks.
Yeah, it does. Even if you're not running any kind of a mod that places limitations on you for being damp,
it still
cold,
rains in the game.
It rains in the game, and I've been the same way. There have been times when, I've stayed overnight at an inn or something like that, and I get up
for it to clear,
and I get up and I'm like, damn it, it's still I can still hear the rain outside, because I'm running a mod that, so I can hear the rain hitting the roof, and I'm like, damn it, it's still raining. So I'll go get another ale, hang out a little bit, wait, still raining. Then I end up buying the room for another night, and I just sleep it off, like sleep for like 24 hours. Damn it, it's still raining, I don't know what it is.
Yeah, I've done that too. I've done that too.
No, obviously that's a small thing.
That's a very small thing.
That's a small thing. But
yes, but see, you're giving me lots of important playing tips.
Am I?
Well, good.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, this is good.
See, we were talking about
there's
sleeping
that.
earlier. Now I know that you can stay at the inn, and that you can, stay as long as you want, as long as you've got enough money to continue buying enough
as long
meat.
as you can rent the room.
Yeah.
Or you can
It's
just
not
wait
even about
there.
the room. Can't you just sit at the bar?
You can.
Yeah, sure. You can just sit at the bar,
Hang out at the meadery.
Well, there's all kinds of things that you can do, Callum, and they get progressively more extreme, depending on the character that you're playing. You could give the character some kind of a cultural type of a quirk or something like that. I know, Joe, at one time you were playing a fairly fanatical orc who used to kind of get upset when there were people using orcish weapons that he didn't feel should be using them.
Oh yeah, basically, his point of view was, if you're not an orc and you're wearing anything orc or wielding something of an orc, you're not worthy. And with that particular character, what I had done was, if I had found anything, whether it's laying on the ground, off of a bandit, in a chest, if it was orc made, I took it.
Yeah.
And then I'd go and store it in a chest of my own, because
whoever
whoever had it wasn't worth it.
Yeah.
And if it was an orc bandit, they weren't worthy either, because they were a bandit.
Right.
So.
Yeah.
Doing your rules.
So if I came across anything orc, I took it and stored it, because it needed to be with its people.
Yeah, that's kind of a cultural thing, right?
Right. And I only ever used orc armor, orc weapons. I didn't use anything. I mean, there's better weapons, but I didn't use them because they weren't orc.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
great approach.
Another limitation you could probably put on, or you could put on, is, I never wear a helmet. Something small like that.
Yeah. And when you think about it, there are some pretty significant bonuses that you can be missing out on when you're not wearing a complete set of armor, including the headgear.
Helmet, correct.
Right?
Yep.
I've had the same issue with characters that I just could not conceive of them wearing a helmet. And so I would forego certain bonuses that I would certainly be entitled to if I just put the dang helmet on, but I could not bring myself to do it, So I think that there are a lot of things like that. In the instance of what Joe's character was doing, His name, by the way, is Grimal, and you can find pictures of him in the gallery on the website. But I think the issue there is you end up in these situations where you're incredibly over encumbered because you've snatched up all the weapons and gear of these people that you're pretty convinced do not deserve to carry it.
It's happened.
Right.
Yep.
And then you also maybe find yourself getting into conflicts where maybe normally a character wouldn't, right? So,
Right.
you know, you spot somebody that you don't think is worthy of a piece of equipment, and now suddenly you feel obligated to do something about it. But it's this sort of self-imposed
Right.
ideal
Right.
that a character has that creates that kind of a situation.
Yeah. The encumbrance piece
Mm-hmm.
came. That was probably in a lot of cases the most difficult to
Right.
overcome.
Right.
But
Yep.
he did use a horse, so if he could at least make it to his horse, he was
Yeah.
was okay.
Okay.
But
That.
sometimes that was a long haul.
Uh-huh.
Or if I forgot
Mhm.
where I left the horse,
Right.
done that once or twice.
So, Callum, I would just, take a look at it and, figure out where you're at as a character right now and whether or not there are any sort of restrictions or limitations that you can place on yourself that have to do with maybe some of the quests you're involved in, with some of the personality traits that you want to emphasize with a character, things of that nature. And I would suggest doing some combination of those things
Right.
and have them be related. I will give you an example. As I said earlier, right now I am working on a character playthrough for my Epicosity project, focusing on my Harbinger, who happens to be a Redguard warrior, a very large Redguard warrior who has become an officer in the Imperial Army. And the interesting thing I've done with him is I brought him into the game with a two-handed sword that I have basically said is a family sword passed down to him by his father. And this is a weapon that he will use religiously. And I know that as I go up levels, a lot of better two-handed weapons are going to present themselves.
Oh, that's a great.
And I'm going to bypass them because he is stuck on the idea that this big two-handed battle saber is the family sword. It's the best blade available, and he's not going to look at another two-handed weapon and think that it's worthy of carrying. He's trying to live up to the legend of his father and his grandfather before him. So there's a restriction right there. Another restriction is that I used alternate start when I created the character, so I brought him into the game immediately as an Imperial soldier, which by default means that I've already got a whole set of enemies out there in the Stormcloaks that are just waiting for me to walk up to them, right, or to show up.
Right.
So there's another limitation. Right from the get-go, I've got a bunch of people who are gunning for me besides the usual bandits and so forth. And then the other psychological thing I do is I've basically said, here is a guy who he's lived his life in a martial society, and now he's transitioned into the Imperial Legion, and he has brought himself up from a grunt soldier to an officer level, and he basically lives by a military code. He lives by a military code. So everything is spit and polish. Everything is done on, same time to bed, same time to rise. You care for your gear. You do these things. The horse has the Imperial saddle that is, considered endorsed by the military. I mean, so he functions in that way. And so I play him as an imposing sort of figure with a lot of authority when he's around his men. But when he goes into Whiterun and he gets into a civilian situation, he doesn't really know what to do, right? So the way that I play him is that he goes to the Bannered Mare to eat, but he mainly goes there because he has a thing for Sadia.
Oh.
And he's he's kind of self-conscious about it. He's kind of embarrassed about it. So he never goes into the tap room. He always goes in the side door, and he sits at the little table in the corner in the kitchen.
Oh, that's
And as
funny.
soon as he sits down, Sadia will come over and ask him what he wants to drink
Oh,
and
that's
eat.
funny.
And so he never goes in the common room. He sits in that little dark corner, and he drinks his ale, and he eats his meal, and he watches Sadia come in and cook, right? It's like he's a lovesick puppy dog watching this girl that he's got a thing for. And the thing I love about that is eventually I'll play the side quest where he's got to save Sadia,
Yeah,
right?
Yeah.
And then who knows, maybe in the future she becomes a marriage prospect. But right now, he's this little kind of obsessed puppy dog around her. But when he's out in the battlefield and he's with his men, he's fierce and authoritarian and he's in control, right? But in the Bannered Mare, he's all mush.
That's
And-
good. I like that a lot.
Yeah, so that's just a little quirk, right? And you can do that kind of stuff over and over
Oh
again.
yeah,
right?
yeah, absolutely.
So anyway, that's the advice we would have for you, Callum. Find a couple of interesting things that you can latch onto that help you with role play. And if you can reinforce some of that with also some things that limit you in terms of game mechanic, that also just kind of forces you a little bit more into situations where you need to think a bit more about what it is you're going to do in a given situation. That's what I got.
I think it's brilliant. It's brilliant.
Anything to add, Matt? I know this is a topic for you that's probably fairly new since you're just getting into the role play aspects of this game now. But
Nope, I can't think of anything. I'm just trying to take it all in. I have the same questions, right? I mean, I'm going through for the first time.
yeah,
The big challenge is that when you start thinking about creating the character, I have to admire the fact that there's a question about how do I make my character fallible, right? There's
Yeah.
got to be some tragic weakness in all of these characters, otherwise it would just be, sort of in a cheat mode. And that's what I think makes it so much more real, not only for even a first playthrough, but for those who have gone through so many times to look at how do we make them almost more human.
Right.
And,
Right.
looking at the number of different ways that you have done this and the way that you've just described it over the last few minutes, it could be cultural, it could be physical, it could be the weapons that you choose to use or choose not to use, or those things that really make, a person and a character extremely unique. And that's really what it all comes down to for the entirety of what you're talking about in general. And that's, this isn't just some story. It's our story. And we make it more of our story when we have those little pieces that make that character ours. Like you're only using orcish weapons, or you've decided that you're going to do this sort of love interest side thing. I wouldn't have thought about that really as I'm going through for the first time. And so I truly appreciate that there's that sense of place, not just of a character in the story, but of a character, over the span of their life or all the things that led up to it. So I know that I'm sounding a little fanboyish right now, but the reality is that there's so much depth to the thought that goes into the question that Callum was asking that, it's great to hear the answer. And it took 20 minutes to get through the answer, but seriously, I'm writing notes now because I think it's so cool.
Well, yeah, I mean, there's a lot of different ways a person could do this. So I think what Joe and I are trying to do is paint a picture for what some of the options might be. I think there's some that are really obvious, like, oh, I'm only going to use this kind of weapon. Sure, that's sort of an obvious thing. But the less obvious is what are all these little psychological things that I can do that sort of play into that? So in that scenario where we understand that a character is so fiercely loyal to his country and fiercely loyal to his family, the idea that he would simply jettison a weapon in exchange for another one just because it was shinier or seemed like it might be better in some way is ludicrous. That's the part that doesn't make sense, right?
Yeah, when you start thinking
But that's
about
what
it
also
from that
makes
way.
the character more real. In
Exactly,
the same
right.
way that the character any other kind of story would be like. It makes them more believable because their actions are consistent. Even if they're consistently weird, they're consistent,
Yeah.
right? I've done it, you've done it, both of you. I'm sure that you've made a decision to follow on after something, whether it was something you wanted to buy, or something that you were learning at school, or something that you were just desperate to get after at work. You know, people might not understand the reason behind it. Might not matter that there are other, better two-handed swords. If you've got a thing for this one, no one's going to talk you out of it. And there's something almost reassuring about that.
Yeah, that's a really cool way to look at it. And I think it's probably only an opinion that somebody with less experience in the game could express in that way, because I think those of us who have been so immersed in the game mechanic for so long, it's hard for us to separate sometimes what the game mechanic, the sort of trappings of the game mechanic versus what are the psychological aspects or traits of a truly realistic character, right? And I think you kind of nailed it there. So this was a great discussion.
In a way, you've just said that it's valuable for the first time ever to have a noob around.
I don't think that's the first time I've said that, is it?
First time.
Hey, okay, so we've gone from cannon fodder to sort of cultural speakeasy here, right?
We appreciate every word you utter. Every word you utter, Matt.
Right.
Well, dear listener, we've come to the end of another episode. We would like to thank fans of the show for your faithful support and continued encouragement. Your enthusiasm is the lifeblood of this podcast, and whether your support comes through Patreon dollars or through iTunes with reviews and recommendations to your friends and family, we appreciate it all. You can contact us through the website at charactercrusade.com. And until next time, remember, it's not about the objective, it's about the journey. So go forth and experience. Hey, Crusaders! If you're anything like me, you appreciate a great story. As lovers of roleplay, we often find ourselves looking to literature for ideas to inspire our next character or playthrough. For me, there's nothing more satisfying than a great story well told. But as much as I love to read, I don't always have time to sit down with a good book. However, all is not lost. In the last couple of years, I've become a huge fan of audiobooks and always have one queued up on my phone for those rare moments when life calms enough for a good story. Whether working in the yard, driving to the office, or simply killing time in line at the DMV, audiobooks make any time story time. And when you purchase a book or set up an account through Character Crusade, you're supporting this podcast at the same time. In today's podcast, we discussed our characters and the flaws that make them feel authentic. My favorite books are those that focus on character first and emphasize an individual's complexity and humanity by allowing us to peer into their past and witness the events that shape who they are. One such book is The Warded Man by Peter V. Brett. I recently completed this book, which is the first in his groundbreaking series Demon Cycle. I was struck by the depth of character development and the similarities between the story's protagonist Arlen and Fleet from the Aranis Arcana Let's Play on Couch Warrior TV. Both noble and filled with self-loathing, Arlen sacrifices his future and his humanity for the good of all mankind in a desperate battle against the evil that rises from the earth each night. The story is exciting and pulls you into Arlen's head as he transforms from an idealistic boy into a legendary warrior. The metamorphosis is fueled by his hatred of demons, grief over the death of his mother, and his disgust at his father's failures. If this book sounds like your kind of story, go to book.charactercrusade.com and start your free 30-day trial. You can cancel at any time, and you get a complimentary book of your choice to get you started. With more than 60,000 titles to choose from, there's no end to the inspiration and entertainment. If you're already a member of audiobooks.com or would like to see Character Crusade's full list of recommended books, go to reading.charactercrusade.com and click on the audiobook of your choice. We would like to thank audiobooks.com for their sponsorship and making it possible to pass great entertainment along to our listeners. Maybe what we should do is we could inject some fake radio commercials for Haunting Brew Meadery.
Oh, that'd be funny. Oh,
Smooth
I
as
was-
honey.
I was gonna bring my my meadery shirt in too.
Mm. Oh yeah,
The meadery down the river.
Blackbriar.
Blackbriar meadery.
Blackbriar. Yeah.
I had gotten a Blackbriar meadery T-shirt for my
That's
birthday.
awesome.
So
That is uncredible.
But see, you can do those advertisements fairly straightforward, right? Did you know that of the 2 Hunting Brew meadery signs on either side of the path leading to the entrance to the meadery, which is always unlocked? Come on in,
Oh, that's awesome.
but don't try to get into the boilery. It's kept under lock and key.
we do this for health reasons.
It's for your safety,
We don't want anyone poisoned.
not without us knowing.
Exactly.
When you come back in the autumn for our poison brew, we really mean it.
Oh, dude.